Imagine traveling abroad, excited for a well-deserved vacation. Imagine doing so with someone that you've been close to for your entire life. The stage is set for a dreamlike escape, but what no one prepares for is when that dream turns into a nightmare. Mildred Bowman, age 62, and her sister Alice Wardle, 68, were British sisters with a rather close bond. Despite their advancing age, they were independent, adventurous women, enjoying their retirement and spending time together traveling. In July of 2005, the two sisters were on a vacation in Benidorm, a popular coastal town in Spain known for its sunny weather and tourist-friendly environment. They had rented an apartment in the seaside city, ready for a relaxing getaway. Benidorm, with its sandy beaches and bustling nightlife, had long been a favorite destination for European tourists, offering a perfect mix of relaxation and entertainment. For Mildred and Alice, it was yet another chance to share their love for exploration and to create more cherished memories together. The sisters, like so many others before them, probably had no concerns when they settled into their rental apartment. It seemed like the ideal place for their vacation, a small, cozy space to rest their heads at night after days filled with exploration. In fact, they had stayed at this same property at least once before, so they were familiar with the rental itself. The apartment that they had rented was more or less a studio. It had a small living area, a kitchen, bathroom, and it came with a foldable Murphy bed. For those that are not aware, a Murphy bed is a bed that folds up vertically into a wall or a cabinet when not in use. It's a common space-saving feature in many small apartments. And at first glance, nothing seemed amiss with the setup. However, unbeknownst to the sisters, the looks of their cozy vacation dwelling would turn out to be deceiving. On July the 4th, 2005, after a long day of enjoying the sights, Mildred and Alice likely retired to bed, exhausted and ready for some needed shut-eye. But at some point during the night, the bed began to malfunction. The bed frame and its heavy components unexpectedly collapsed upon them, pinning both women underneath. The sheer weight of the wooden frame and mattress was overwhelming. The bed had essentially sealed them in, with no room to escape. The tragic reality of their situation became painfully clear. They were trapped, being slowly crushed beneath the bed, with little hope of calling for help. Over the next several hours, the pressure of the confined space and hulking weight of the bed frame, along with the collapsed cabinet, would end both Mildred's and Alice's lives. For several days after, the sisters were considered missing. Friends and family, unaware of the unfolding disaster, began to worry. The duo's failure to return calls and check in raised alarms, but with them being on holiday, it wasn't immediately a cause for panic. Unfortunately, their absence would soon turn from concern to a devastating discovery. On July 7th, 2005, concerned staff at the apartment complex entered the room to check on the sisters after noticing that they hadn't checked out as initially planned. What they found was horrifying. The collapsed Murphy bed, now clearly dislodged from the wall, the lifeless bodies of the two sisters, and the evidence of what had clearly transpired. Authorities were called immediately, but it was far too late. Mildred Bowman and Alice Wardle had both tragically died as a result of their injuries. The weight and position of the bed left them pinned, with no ability to move. Their deaths had likely been agonizing and slowly drawn out. It was determined that they had been dead for days before they were found, with the bed likely collapsing on them between the hours of 11 p.m. on July 4th and 2 a.m. the morning of July 5th. The story of their demise quickly gained attention, not only in Spain, but also back home. The bizarre and tragic circumstances surrounding their deaths shocked the public. how could something as mundane as a bed become such a deadly hazard? The more details that emerged, the more questions were raised about the safety of the apartment and the conditions that allowed such a tragedy to occur. The Murphy bed in the sisters' rented apartment had not been properly installed. Reports later revealed that the bed's frame had not been properly secured to the wall, and the mechanism meant to hold it in place was faulty. Essentially, the bed had been a ticking time bomb, waiting for the proper moment to fail. In the aftermath of this tragedy, their family sought justice. Understandably distraught by the circumstances of the sisters' deaths, Mildred and Alice's relatives filed lawsuits against both the property owners and those responsible for the bed's installation and maintenance. They alleged negligence on the part of the apartment complex for allowing a dangerously faulty bed to be used by guests without proper inspection or repair. While legal action was taken, the case also ignited a broader conversation about safety standards in rental properties, particularly for tourists. The tragedy served as a wake-up call about the risks posed by faulty furniture, especially in environments where safety standards may not be as strict as one might expect. The incident led to calls for stricter regulations and inspections of rental accommodations in order to prevent future accidents. Mildred and Alice's deaths became a symbol of importance of property safety and accountability. For many, it was a chilling indication of how seemingly everyday items could become deadly in the blink of an eye. The tragic deaths of Mildred Bowman and Alice Wardle were a heartbreaking accident, one that took the lives of two beloved sisters who simply wanted to enjoy their golden years. Their story serves as a stark reminder of just how fragile life can be, even in the most unexpected of ways. Though nothing will bring them back, their memory lives on, not only through the grief of their family and friends, but as a cautionary tale for anyone who might take for granted the safety of their surroundings. We can only hope that their deaths led to real change that prevents such a tragedy from ever happening again. A prize competition that seemed harmless, a new gaming console on the line, and a radio station pushing the limits for entertainment. What could possibly go wrong? But for Jennifer Strange, a young mother of 3, this seemingly innocent contest would lead to a horrific and completely avoidable tragedy, one that still holds lasting ramifications even to this day. It was January the 12th, 2007, when Jennifer Strange, a 28-year-old woman from Rancho Cordova, California, participated in a contest held by a Sacramento radio station, KDND 107.9. The contest, which was humorously titled "Hold Your Wee for a Wee," had a simple premise. Contestants would drink large amounts of water without using the restroom, with the promise that the last person to relieve themselves would win a brand new Nintendo Wii game system. The Nintendo Wii was one of the hottest gaming consoles at the time, with high demand and limited availability, making it a coveted prize. Jennifer, like many others, was eager to win the console for her children. Her 3 kids were excited about the prospect of having the latest in gaming technology, and the thought of surprising them with a Wii was enough to motivate her to participate in the contest. Jennifer was described by friends and family as a loving mother, a compassionate woman, and someone who was always thinking of others. Entering the competition was her way of going above and beyond to make her kids happy. But what she and most of the participants didn't realize was the very real danger posed by this seemingly harmless competition. The contest took place at the KDND radio station, where contestants were given bottles of water to drink every 15 minutes. Initially, the quantity seemed manageable, with each person required to drink around 8 ounces of water at a time. But as the contest continued, the amount of water consumed increased, while the rules of not being allowed to go to the bathroom remained the same. As the hours dragged on, the contestants were drinking large quantities of water, far more than what the human body is equipped to handle in such a short period of time. At first, the event was lighthearted. Contestants joked with the radio hosts, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement as they all eagerly competed for the prize. But soon, some participants began to show signs of discomfort. Several complained of feeling nauseous, bloated, and lightheaded. This included Jennifer. Jennifer managed to drink nearly 2 gallons of water in just over 70 minutes, all while holding in the urge to use the bathroom. Despite the growing discomfort, she pushed on, determined to win the contest for her kids. Radio hosts and staff laughed off the complaints, even making jokes about the bloating and discomfort that the contestants were experiencing. What neither Jennifer nor the station seemed to understand at the time was that her symptoms were signs of a potentially fatal condition, hyponatremia, more commonly known as water intoxication. This condition occurs when a person consumes an excessive amount of water in a short period of time, diluting the sodium levels in their blood to dangerously low levels. This imbalance causes cells in the body to swell, and in severe cases, can lead to brain swelling, seizures, coma, and even death. Jennifer eventually withdrew from the competition, citing severe pain and discomfort. She even commented to one of the station employees that she felt unwell and complained of a terrible headache. Despite the warning signs, no medical professionals were on site, and the station staff brushed off the concerns. After leaving the contest, Jennifer made the short drive back to her home, but her condition worsened rapidly. By the time she was inside her house, she was in immense pain and started experiencing severe symptoms associated with water intoxication, including confusion and loss of consciousness. Her mother later reported that Jennifer called her, saying simply, "I'm not feeling right, Mom. Something is wrong." Later that afternoon, Jennifer was discovered deceased in her home. The cause of death was determined to be acute water intoxication, a direct result of the contest she had participated in only hours previously. The news of Jennifer Strange's death shocked not only her family and friends, but the entire Sacramento community and beyond. The radio station's seemingly innocent contest had turned deadly, and the questions of accountability, negligence, and oversight began to surface almost immediately. Following Jennifer's death, her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the parent company of KDND. The lawsuit alleged that the station and its employees were negligent in conducting the contest, ignoring clear signs of distress among the participants, and failing to provide appropriate medical supervision or warnings about the dangers of what these contestants were doing. As the lawsuit progressed, troubling details emerged. Audio recordings from the contest revealed that the radio hosts had been made aware of the risks during the event. A registered nurse even called in to warn the station that drinking too much water in a short period of time could be fatal. But the advice was disregarded by the on-air personalities, joking that the contestants had signed releases and that they'll be fine. This cavalier attitude toward the participants' health, coupled with the station's failure to provide any medical guidance, was a critical factor in the case. In 2009, a Sacramento jury awarded Jennifer Strange's family $16.5 million in damages. The jury found that the radio station had acted with gross negligence by failing to recognize the danger of water intoxication and by ignoring the warnings during the contest. The lawsuit and Jennifer's untimely death led to significant scrutiny of KDND 107.9. In the wake of the incident, the station was eventually shut down. The Hold Your Wee for a Wee contest became a cautionary tale about the dangers of irresponsible promotions and publicity stunts. Jennifer Strange's death was a devastating and preventable tragedy. What should have been a fun and harmless contest for a prize turned into an utter nightmare. leaving 3 children without their mother and a family shattered by grief. Her story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding the risks involved in any activity, no matter how innocent it may seem, and the critical need for proper oversight when hosting events such as these. Now 17 years removed from this heartbreaking incident, the question still remains: how many tragedies could be avoided if we took a moment to think about the real-world consequences of what we feel are innocuous actions? Freak accidents can be the stuff of nightmares, a completely unpredictable tragic twist of fate that can alter lives in an instant. Such was true in the case of Humberto Hernandez, a young man from Oakland, California, who never imagined that a simple walk down the street on a summer's day would invite unforeseen consequences, ones that simply cannot be undone. It was a sunny July day in 2007. The streets of Oakland were bustling with people going about their everyday lives. Among them was Humberto Hernandez, a 24-year-old man walking with his wife along the sidewalk of 98th Avenue. By all accounts, it was an ordinary afternoon, one filled with no particular signs of danger or warnings of what was to come. At that very moment, just down the street from Humberto, a car was speeding down the road. The driver, either distracted or simply reckless, lost control of the vehicle. The car swerved sharply, veering off its path, and in an instant, a split second that would forever change lives, the car slammed head-on into a fire hydrant. The impact was so forceful that the fire hydrant was ripped clean from the ground, with a powerful spray of water shooting into the air from the broken pipe beneath. But what came next was beyond anyone's wildest imaginings. The immense pressure from the water below launched the fire hydrant into the air like a missile. The 200-pound chunk of metal became a deadly projectile, sent flying down the street at an incredible speed. In a terrifyingly swift and tragic moment, the airborne fire hydrant struck Humberto in the back of the head. The force was catastrophic. He was killed instantly, collapsing to the ground before anyone around could comprehend what had just happened. His wife, who was walking mere inches from Humberto at that moment, was left unharmed but obviously horrified. In a matter of seconds, an ordinary walk down the street turned into a fatal disaster. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do for the young man. The impact of the fire hydrant had been so severe that his skull had been crushed and nearly blown out. Police and investigators arrived to assess the situation, struggling to piece together how such an improbable and freak accident could have occurred. In the aftermath, Oakland residents were left in disbelief. A fire hydrant, an everyday object seen on countless street corners, had become the unlikely instrument of death. How could such a thing happen? How could a day so normal end in such an extraordinary tragedy? As investigators examined the details, it became clear that a combination of high-speed driving and infrastructure failure had created an unfortunate perfect storm. Fire hydrants are designed to be sturdy and secure, but when struck with enough force, especially at high speeds, the powerful water pressure beneath can turn them into unforgiving missiles. The driver of the vehicle, whose identity was not immediately released, stayed at the scene and cooperated with authorities. It was determined that the driver was at fault for the accident, having lost control of the car and hitting the hydrant. While there were no indications of malicious intent, the incident raised questions about reckless driving and the potential consequences of such behavior. Humberto Hernandez's death became a sobering reminder of how quickly life can change. It wasn't a high-risk activity or even a dangerous job that took his life. He was simply walking down the street. The randomness and brutality of the accident struck a chord with the public, leading many to reflect on how unpredictable life can be. In the days that followed, the Oakland community rallied around Humberto's family. Shock, grief, and sadness filled the neighborhood, with many struggling to comprehend the sheer improbability of what had happened. Vigils were held, flowers and candles were left at the site where Humberto lost his life, and people from all walks of life came together to offer their condolences to his loved ones. Humberto's death also led to further discussions about road safety and the importance of securing city infrastructure. While the hydrant had been properly installed, the incident highlighted the devastating consequences of reckless driving. Some called for increased traffic enforcement in the area, while others pushed for more barriers around hydrants or other safety measures that could prevent such an accident from happening again. Though the driver remained at the scene and cooperated, they faced legal action for the events that led to Humberto's death. Ultimately, the accident was deemed a result of reckless driving, and subsequent charges were brought against the driver for their role. However, for Humberto's family, no legal consequences could ever undo the devastation they had endured. The senseless and random nature of his death was a painful reminder of how fleeting life truly is. The tragic death of Humberto Hernandez was one of those accidents that defied logic, a freak occurrence that left a lasting impact on all who have heard the story. One moment, Humberto was simply walking down the street with his wife, and the next, his life was snuffed out in one of the most unpredictable ways imaginable. In the end, Humberto's death serves as a somber lesson to us all. Life can change in an instant, and sometimes danger comes from the most unexpected places. Whether it's a careless driver or a piece of metal we pass by every day, we can never truly know what might happen. What we can do, however, is hold our loved ones close and appreciate every moment that we have to share. Hey guys, if you're into the content that we create, we've got a Patreon where you can support the show and get early access to new episodes before everyone else. Just head on over to patreon.com/Malevolent Mischief or check the link in the description and join our community today. This story comes from a night a few months back. Wife and I had been swamped with our respective jobs, and cooking a meal in this particular evening wasn't going to happen. So we decided to make our way to the local White Castle for burgers and shakes. Simple enough. This is a restaurant we frequented for years, and while it's not in the best area, it's not like heading to it after the sun sets is going to be met by great threat of harm. At least, not any other time that we've made the drive-thru dash in the past. So, it's about 8:45 p.m. when we pull up to the aforementioned drive-thru. My wife is driving, I'm riding passenger, and already thinking about how many delectable burgers I plan on smashing. We order at the speaker box, and seeing as we're the only car in line, we think it'll be a quick pass before we're on our way home with shakes in hand, burgers in bags, and smiles across our faces. But much to our frustration, it seemed White Castle only had a single employee manning the shop because our order was taking forever to come out of the window. Whatever, these things happen. I remember working fast food when I was younger, so I know how it can go. But as we're sitting there waiting, we noticed this guy starting to wander up to the car. We hadn't noticed him when we pulled in, but he's ambling across the parking lot directly towards us. He's a dirty, stringy-haired, skinny mess, and he looks like he's high on something. For a few minutes, this guy just stands there on the passenger side of the car, maybe about 10 feet away, staring and swaying back and forth awkwardly. I don't feel like being asked for money or a ride or whatever, so I roll my window up. There's something rather off about this dude, other than the fact that he seems high. Now, I'm not throwing shade here, but my wife has an awful habit of not locking the doors when we get into the car, something that I've done my best to instill in her is just good practice. But it's about at this point that I glance down and see that, sure enough, all the doors of the car are unlocked. While the guy is still a short distance away, I don't want to leave it to chance that he doesn't have bad intentions in mind. So I reach down and click the button, hearing the reassuring lock sound permeate the entire car. I go to shoot my wife a telling glance, but before I can whip my head around, this tweaky guy has grabbed the back door handle and begun pulling at it furiously. My wife and I both freak out, and she hits the gas. We circle the building and park on the far end of the parking lot, because I want to tell management that there's a creep in the parking lot and, damn it, we aren't leaving without our food. After we park, we have a clear sight line to the drive-thru from where we are, and we watch this guy walk back to a car, now no longer swaying or looking strung out at all. He says something to the driver. The driver slides over into the passenger seat. Stringy-haired dude looks back over his shoulder directly at the both of us, before doling out the single creepiest wave that I've ever been on the receiving end of. Then he gets into the car and simply pulls out of the rear exit of the parking lot, disappearing into the night a few moments later. Neither my wife nor I really know what that was about. If he was just going to try to hop into our car, why didn't he announce his presence by standing next to it awkwardly for a few minutes? What was the intent if he got in? While I know it likely wasn't anything good, I can't help but wonder what would have come our way had I not gotten those doors locked. Likely, we would have wound up carless, but I know that there's a very real possibility that that's not all he would have taken that night. I've worked my share of unsettling late night shifts, but one incident still haunts me to this day. It happened years ago when I worked the drive-thru at a small fast food chain just outside of town. Our location was one of those 24-hour spots that always seem to attract a strange crowd after dark. You get used to it after a while. Drunk customers, late night munchies, and the occasional creepy vibe. But this particular night, it was different. It was something that still makes my skin crawl anytime I think about it. I was used to seeing regulars, especially the night owls. There was one guy in specific who showed up nearly every night, almost like clockwork. I never knew his name, but he was hard to forget. He drove this beat-up old car, headlights always dimmer than they should have been, and his demeanor was off. Not rude, not aggressive, just unsettling. He was always quiet, ordering the same thing every night. A double cheeseburger with extra onions, no drink, no fries. It wasn't just his order that made me uneasy, though. It was the way he'd look at me when he pulled up to the window. He never said much, just handed me the cash, stared without blinking, and drove off, usually without a word. Something about him always felt wrong, like he was watching me too closely, sizing me up. But as a young woman working the night shift, you learn to ignore the strange encounters. It's just part of the job, or so I thought. One night, he came through the drive-thru at around 2 a.m., per usual. I took his order, prepared his food, and handed it to him. Everything seemed normal at first, until it wasn't. As he took the bag, he didn't pull away like he usually did. Instead, he just sat there, staring at me through the open window. His eyes locked on mine, that eerie, unblinking stare, more intense than usual. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, before he finally spoke. "You ever get lonely working here by yourself at night?" The question caught me off guard. He'd never spoken to me like that before. My heart skipped a beat, and I forced a smile, trying to brush it off as nothing. "Nah, I'm fine. I've got plenty to keep me busy. Plus, my manager's in his office," I replied, knowing full and well that I was the only person in the building, hoping that my response would prompt him to drive off. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned a little closer, almost through the window now, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you sure about that?" Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. My instinct screamed that this was no longer just a weird conversation with a regular customer. There was something darker here, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I wanted him to leave, and I was seconds away from slamming the window in his face when he finally drove off. I chalked it up to another strange encounter and went about the rest of my shift. But that feeling of unease lingered. Something about him that night felt even more different than any other time. It didn't take long to realize that I wasn't overreacting. A few nights later, he showed up again. Same time, same order. This time though, he didn't go straight through the drive-thru right away. Instead, I saw him park his car at the edge of the lot, far from the building, a spot that the parking lot street lamps just didn't quite reach. He just sat there, headlights off. It felt like he was just watching, waiting. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But when he finally pulled into the line, that familiar sense of dread hit me hard. He handed me cash for his order as usual, but this time his hand lingered just a little too long, brushing against mine as he gave me the money. His stare was intense. His eyes locked on mine as if he was trying to figure something out. "Can I come inside?" he asked, his voice low and almost eager. I froze. It was the middle of the night, and we had a strict no-entry policy after hours for safety purposes. "Sorry, man, the lobby's closed." I hoped that saying that would be the end of it. But the way he smiled, this slow, unsettling grin, told me that he wasn't going to take no for an answer. "Oh, come on. I just need to use the bathroom." He said this with a casual tone, but his eyes told a different story. There was something in his look that felt almost predatory. I shook my head and tried to stay calm. "I can't let you in. Company policy." For a moment, he didn't move. He just stared back at me, that sick smile still plastered on his face. And then, without another word, he drove off. Even though he wasn't in front of me any longer, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Later that night, during a lull in customers, I went to take the trash out behind the building. As I walked toward the dumpster, I saw something that made my blood run cold. His car, parked right behind the building. The engine was off, the headlights were dark, but there was no mistaking it. He was still there. I instantly bolted back inside, locked the doors, and called my manager. It was while I was on the phone that I felt like my heart was in my throat. It was nearly 3 a.m. now, and while I was hoping my boss would answer his phone, he didn't. In between the second and third call attempts, that's when I glanced up at the main doors. The man was now standing there, hands above his head pressed against the glass door, resting his forehead right where the daily operating hours graphic was. It's like he was waiting for me to notice him, before that same low, slow grin crept across his face. A look that almost made me wet myself there and then. That's when one of his hands slid from an upright position down to the door handle. He yanked, but thank God that door didn't budge. He would yank every few seconds, and in between each pull, that smile never left his face. It felt like I was caught in some sinister loop in time, before I finally caught my bearings and changed up from calling my boss to phoning 911. The moment that a dispatcher picked up, I went in to explain how a customer was trying to make entry into the store, when the man let out a blood-curdling scream and began to swing his fist wildly into the glass door. His blows landed with a sickening thud, one that I could hear intertwined with his scream. To the dispatcher's credit, she didn't ask me 1,000 unnecessary questions. Once I told her the address and the situation, she said that cops were on their way. I stayed on the line with her, and even she heard his tirade. That's when the dispatcher told me to go to the rear of the store, lock the door, and not come out until she tells me that the cops have arrived. I follow instructions, head to the back office, and lock the door behind me. This is the general manager's office and has the security monitors in it as well. I can see that man continuing to pound on the door, making sounds that I can't even categorize, when all of a sudden, he just stops. The screaming, the pounding, everything. And just like it was a switch to be flipped, he walked back to his car at the edge of the lot, started it up, and began to pull off. I don't know if it was that he heard sirens off in the distance, or if he even knew that the cops were coming. But he picked up and left. But before he did, he drove by the front of the store, passing the set of doors that he had just unleashed a barrage of fists on, where he stopped for just a moment. His driver's side door is nearest to the entry, and that's when I see him look right into the camera that I'm on the other side of. One more time, that same grin, and then he drives off. Cops get to the store no more than 5 minutes later, and I tell them all that I can. Regular customer. Here's his car description. Banging on the door. All I can recall. They take the report, urge me to continue trying to reach my manager, and then leave once again. So, with a few hours still left on my shift, I'm alone and still reeling from all that had just happened. I stayed on this job another month or so before deciding that it wasn't for me any longer. As I'm sure you can guess, I never saw that guy again. Not complaining one bit, because I don't know what I would have done if I ever saw those dim headlights pop up in the drive-thru again. I'm absolutely glad that it never came to that. This is a story from my childhood, and while I remember it being pretty scary as a kid, I don't think I wrapped my head fully around it until much later. Like any other kid of the 90s, one of my favorite places to get food from was McDonald's. I can actively remember bothering my parents for Happy Meals constantly from the ages of 5 till around 8. This particular evening, I guess that I wore my dad down so that he had had enough and we made our way to our regular McDonald's. I'm sure my dad knew what I wanted because it was the regular for me, but I made sure to announce to him that I wanted a cheeseburger Happy Meal with extra pickles, fries, a high C, and a boy's toy. That last part was of the utmost importance. We make it to the window after placing our order, and now the wait was really on. I could smell those salty fries in the air, and I knew I'd have my burger and toy in only a matter of moments. I was on what a 6-year-old's version of Cloud 9 is. I'm in the back seat having my own personal party when someone walks by our car on the driver's side. This was odd to even me as a kid because it's a drive-thru, not a walk-through. Whoever it was, I remember guessing that it was a man, stopped at my dad's window, and in a low, almost angry-sounding voice, I remember hearing the words, "Give it up. Now." I don't know what it's in reference to. I don't know why this person is talking to my dad. I don't know anything. My dad just stammers out, Okay, no problem. We just want to go home." This statement confused me because I didn't just want to go home. I wanted that Happy Meal. I remember being on the cusp of blurting out my disapproval when I hear even more angry words shouted, this time coming from behind the car. "Put it down. Get on your knees." The man in the window pauses for a beat, but then does what he's being told. The rest of this is kind of a blur for me, but I see 2 big guys in uniform, policemen, come around to my dad's side of the car. They hold the man down before lifting him up and taking him back behind the car. My dad turns over his shoulder and looks at me before asking if I'm okay. I was, but where's my burger? He says we're going to park and talk to the police for a minute, but we'll get our food afterwards. So we did. Dad pulls into the parking lot, talks to the police for what felt like a long time in my little kid brain. Eventually, they wrap up the adult stuff, and I'm able to get the good stuff. The Ronald McDonald Prime Burger, extra pickles, and my High C orange. I remember asking my dad what that was all about, and all he said was, "I'll tell you when you're a little older." When we got home that night, I remember my parents going and talking privately in their bedroom. When they came back out, my mom had clearly been crying, a sight that I hated as a kid, and even now. So I figured that whatever happened was upsetting, and that's all that I needed to know. Well, fast forward several years. I'm in high school at this point. Dad picked me up from soccer practice in the late afternoon and opted to stop by the Mickey D's drive-thru instead of cooking once home. While we're sitting in line, I remember what transpired all those years back and ask him about it. I felt a bit ditzy for never connecting the dots how I should have after my dad told me the entire story. When I was younger, we had finished ordering and my dad was waiting at the window to pay. He had his wallet out in his hand, ready for the employee to come to the window and take the payment. But before they did, a masked man walked alongside our car and got between my dad's door and the window. That part I more or less knew. When he said "give it up," he was referring to my dad's wallet. My dad willingly let go of it. He would have done so anyway. But what I didn't know was that the man had presented a big black gun and pressed it to my dad's forehead in the process of all this. When my dad said that we just wanted to go home, that was his way of telling the man that he could have the wallet, that it wasn't just my father in the car, and as a silent plea to not hurt his son. It was then that the bad guy had taken a moment to look into the car. My dad didn't know if it was to verify that someone else was in the car, or if he was looking for something more of value to take. But in that moment, that's when two police officers, one's on their meal break, just so happened to pull into the drive-thru right behind us. When they saw what was happening, they didn't hesitate to jump into action and apprehend the man attempting to rob us. As my dad told this story though, the thing that scared me even more was the fact that the cops weren't right next to us when they told the guy to freeze. If he wanted to, he could have pulled the trigger and blown my father away right in front of my eyes. It didn't happen that way, obviously, but the thought alone still scares me now. My dad told the story without batting an eyelash, as if having a gun pulled on him was not anything new. My father sells insurance. There's no way that he's faced a situation like this before or after this singular occurrence. But the calmness my father held in the face of a loaded handgun makes me proud. I'm thankful to those cops as well, the ones that just so happened to pick my favorite McDonald's to stop at for their own adult Happy Meals. I'm unsure of how this story would have turned out without them playing their part. I just hope that no other kid out there that's imploring their parents to stop at McDonald's unwittingly puts their dad in the same spot that I did. Love you, Pops. I'd like to think that I have pretty decent instincts now when it comes to knowing who has bad intentions, but I haven't always been as cautious or as observant as I am currently. When I was in high school, I always felt so ugly. I had low self-esteem and high anxiety, which was really more of the problem rather than my looks. So if anyone of the opposite sex even gave me a little bit of attention, I would start to like them. I was pretty innocent despite how desperate I was, having only kissed one boy. So when I was 17 and a college guy put interest into me, I immediately clung to him. I was on this app way before Tinder, and I met a guy who lived 7 hours from my home city. His name was Brandon. and he was gorgeous. Blonde hair, muscular, blue eyes. He played soccer for his university and was 19 years old. Honestly, he wasn't my usual type. Back then, I really liked guys with darker hair and eyes. In fact, I still do. But he was really handsome and really kind in our interactions. He would shower me with compliments and talk to me all the time. I lived alone in an apartment with just my cats, which, in and of itself, is a long story on its own. So when I would get lonely or scared, he was always there to comfort me. A month into talking, and he started asking for pictures. Not ones of my face, but obviously more risque. This was nearly a decade ago now, and I didn't really have a good concept of stranger danger on the internet. I mean, smartphones had really only been around for a few years previous to this point. 17-year-old me who was so insecure, just wanted to make him happy because I couldn't believe I had gotten a guy like him. I was ready to do anything he asked. I never sent naked pictures. I was too insecure for that. But I would send pictures of me in my bra or in my panties. He would shower me with compliments saying just how sexy and beautiful I was. And I fell for every word. With time, I began to get upset though. I wanted to see him. I would always send him pictures when he asked, but he never sent me any. He would show me body pictures of him with his shirt off or things of that sort, but the pictures were always of bad quality, as if someone was using a camera phone back in 2005. When I started getting too persistent, he promised that he would start calling me. And for some reason, this appeased me, and we'd talk many times a week over the phone. After a couple of months, he began to get increasingly sexual towards me, telling me what he wanted to do with me and how badly he wanted me. This made me nervous since, like I said before, I had only ever kissed one other boy. But it also made me a little bit excited. It felt good to be wanted by someone that I had really grown to like. This was all during the first semester of my senior year of high school, and I was going to turn 18 the next semester, in late January. As it got to be around Christmas time, he started to talk about coming to my city to see me for my birthday. This had me really excited, since I wanted to see him in person so very badly. We had first spoken about me going to him, something that he had insisted upon, but I chickened out and said that I couldn't do the drive alone. It was an excuse because I really didn't want to go to an older guy's house and stay with him alone. My own home made me feel just a bit more safe. We planned on a weekend after my birthday, and everything seemed fine. But then one day in my choir class, my best friend, an exchange student from Germany, was talking with me about my online boyfriend. I was telling her about him and showing pictures, and she got rather unsettled. "Have you seen him on video?" I told her no, and she gave me a quizzical look. "Something doesn't feel right here. There's no way he's real. Not that you couldn't date someone like him, but he just seems too perfect." She was very direct and blunt with me about it, something that my other friends just weren't. So I took her words deeply. And now, all these years later, I'm still grateful that I did so. I immediately asked him for a picture of his face. He made up some excuse about how he couldn't take a picture right then. So I persisted, asking every single day. Finally, my instincts were kicking in, and I was getting scared. I told him I wanted him to video call me. He refused. I fought him on it for hours one night, telling him that if he tells me the truth, I won't be mad. But once again, he refused. I put the name that he gave me into Facebook, determined to find him on my own if he wasn't going to give in. But nothing came up. I texted him telling him that I couldn't find his Facebook, and that's when he gave in, giving me a completely different name this time. I remember just feeling cold as I read this new alias. I looked up the account and everything he had told me was a lie. His name, his face, his age. He was 25, not 19. I was terrified. I thought I had been talking to someone just a few years older, which is legal in my state. But he was almost 8 years older than me. And that's what caused me to immediately stop texting him. But that's when he started getting obsessive. He would text me dozens of times a day, calling me over and over again. He would beg me to answer him, to give him a chance. Then he started threatening me to answer. He told me that he had saved all of my pictures. He kept them all and told me he would send them to my friends, my family, and anyone else that followed me on Facebook. He was saying how he would show everyone me in my bra and show our text messages talking about what he would do to me sexually if we met. Looking back on it, all of that was much more damaging to him than me. But I was young, stupid, and afraid. I hated my body so much, and I was absolutely terrified of people seeing it. So I started talking to him again, although more reserved and cautious this time. The days inched closer to my birthday and the weekend that we had planned. Our messages had become bland and short since I was trying to make him lose interest in me. But he never gave up. If I took too long to message, then he would pick up threatening me again. My birthday fell on a Monday that year, and he sent me all kinds of messages. I don't even remember what I did that birthday. I didn't have many friends, and I never liked to celebrate, so it was likely something small. When Friday hit, I got a text from him that morning saying that he was driving to my city and that he would pick me up from school. I was terrified. I had lost a lot of my friends the semester before, so they obviously had no clue of my situation. Out of desperation, I went to one of my guy friends who I hadn't talked to in a couple of months and spilled everything to him. He was a longtime friend of mine, so he was sympathetic and promised to follow me home that day. I went straight to my car, ignoring the mass amounts of texts saying, "Where are you?" and "I'm here." My friend drove behind me all the way to my apartment, which he had no clue I was living in, and stayed with me as I cried for a while. I turned my phone off, and my friend left later in the evening. Brandon had no clue where I lived, but I was still paranoid. What if he somehow found me? Only 3 people knew where I lived, 4 now with my guy friend, and Brandon didn't come into contact with any of them. When I finally turned my phone on, he was right back to threatening me again. I was exhausted and fed up. I started spam texting him back, yelling and venting. I told him how stressed he had made me and how what he was doing was wrong. I told him to send the pictures, that I didn't care anymore. I started to attack his character, telling him how no one could love him if he hides who he is, then chooses to treat people like shit when they catch him in the lie. Thankfully for me, he had enough care for me to take my words to heart, or whatever it was. He apologized, told me that he deleted all the pictures. He swore to leave me alone as long as we could still talk every once in a while as friends. I reluctantly agreed, even though I knew he was lying. I talked to him for about a month after that, short responses, until he eventually gave up. Even now in my late 20s, I still see his name appear sometimes. I blocked his number and deleted him on everything, but his name still pops up on Instagram or Snapchat when he's trying to re-add me. He's the reason that I won't give my name or my picture out. That's a lesson that maybe I should have learned earlier in life, but I suppose that's something that's better late learned than never learned at all. First off, this story happened almost a decade back. I'll jump right in because it's long. I got home from work one day and logged into Facebook to find a message from someone that I didn't know. It was too long ago to remember verbatim, but it was along the lines of, "Hey, I know you have no idea who I am, but I've been trying to decide what to do for a few days and figured I had to let you know what's been going on. Someone's been catfishing me using your identity for over 2 years now, and I just found out about it last week." The sender of the message was pretty clearly shaken up and understandably was experiencing a mix of emotions. According to her, she had met the imposter online a little over 2 years prior to her writing this, and that they had been engaged in a pretty intimate long-distance relationship for a majority of that time. The imposter had created a Facebook and had, over time, reposted almost all of my photos with their own captions to them, including a good amount of art that I'd drawn that they had taken credit for. They created fake profiles for a good amount of my close friends and family too, just so they could comment on the photos of themselves to make the profile seem more legit. The funniest part to me is that although most things in my real life seem to be mirrored in this fake profile, I, a straight male, was instead portrayed as trans. I think the main reason for this was that the sender of this message and the imposter would actually speak on the phone. The imposter turned out to be a female in the end, and therefore needed a reason to justify her more feminine-sounding voice. The sender of the message was justifiably both angry and creeped out, and wanted to find the catfish. She started asking me a lot of questions about my life, but phrasing them like, "Is your sister's name such and such? And did you go to this high school?" Some of this was clearly information that anyone could glean from a quick browse of my profile. But then she asked, "Is your best friend so-and-so?" Which struck me as odd, since despite this person actually being my closest friend, and who I spend the most time with, we have barely any Facebook photos together, and most are from a long time ago. Then she asked, "Were you adopted? And are your half-siblings' names ABC and XYZ?" These final questions sealed the deal for me, since I knew for a fact I'd never posted about being adopted online. The sender of the message already had an idea that this person had known me in real life, but this served to confirm it for me. The sender of the message had contacted me shortly after confronting the imposter for the very first time. I guess after 2 years, they'd finally become suspicious of the fact that the imposter wouldn't show their face. I have no idea how it took this long for them to figure that they were being played, but I'm glad they finally decided to give the ultimatum of, "Show your face, or I'm cutting you off." I'm pretty sure that this is the point where the imposter admitted to being a catfish, and that she'd been using the identity of someone she had a crush on in high school before hanging up the call. I was given the URL so I could look through the profile myself, which was up for about 2 days after I saw it, before it had all been removed. It was definitely really bizarre. The imposter had posted more than I ever had on Facebook, and it genuinely seemed like they lived a pretty involved double life online as me. Almost everyone I'd posted photos with on my real profile would then have their own fake profiles created that had enough content to be genuinely convincing so they could be tagged in and validate these new photos. Some of these profiles seem to have gone and made their own real friends as well, and I wondered if any of those were used to facilitate even more online dating deception. Either way, the amount of time that this person had spent fabricating their alter ego's online presence was pretty shocking. The whole time I'd been crawling down this Facebook rabbit hole, the sender of the message was looking through my real profile. After a while, she sent me a message saying, "Did you take these photographs?" and showed me what I remember as a black and white photo of a barn or something to that effect. I hadn't, which was weird since everything else on the fake profile originated with me, and she'd noticed the discrepancy. We both tried reverse image searching with no luck. Then, either through a stroke of genius or somewhat suspiciously, I really couldn't tell, she thought to flip the fake number the imposter had written into the fake FB profile around in reverse, and a Google search came up with a landline that belonged to the home address of a girl that I'd gone to school with. Real me was even Facebook friends with real imposter's profile, so we both went snooping around and found the photo that she'd claimed I'd taken, which pretty much confirmed to me that this was indeed the imposter. I'm pretty sure there were more indicators to the sender as well, but I can't remember. I thought about messaging the girl for a while, but decided that it probably wouldn't lead to anything good. At the time, my thoughts were definitely, let's not meet. I talked a few times with the sender of the message just to try and decompress a bit. But honestly, I just wanted to distance myself from the entire situation. Also, I held my own suspicions for the sender as well. I figured maybe it was imposters' one last-ditch effort to try and talk to me. Although, when it was all over, the sender seemed to be eager to leave all this behind as well. So, maybe not. Either way, it was a truly strange experience. I felt freaked out, in addition to feeling violated. But I guess there was a small part of me that was flattered by it. I had a lot of mixed emotions, I'm not gonna lie about that. The weirdest part to me is that I'm a really approachable person and would have definitely been willing to talk and probably be friends if this person had just approached me instead. Although I'm still not sure if this was done due to an obsession for me, or if this person felt like I was just a suitable image to base this fabricated persona off of. I remember talking to her probably twice throughout high school, and really didn't have a very good idea of who she was, other than the quiet hipster girl. If either person involved happens to hear this story, I'd definitely be happy to talk now. It's been years, but I've gone from being very put off to finding myself wondering why this person chose me over a myriad of other more attractive or interesting online people to base their other life off of. According to the sender who contacted me, she'd probably spent more time online pretending to be me than she actually did going about her own life. I have a tumultuous history of addiction, and I've had plenty of my own escapes, which is why it's always fascinated me that someone would want to pretend to live someone else's life as a means of doing that. Because at the end of the day, the person pretending to be me had no idea that I spent my time daydreaming of being a different person as well. It just goes to show that no matter how much you wish you were someone else, chances are that person has plenty of their own reasons to want to escape their own demons for their own reasons. Thanks for listening. I'm posting this from a throwaway because this is something from my past, and I'm not too proud of it. So from around the ages of 12 to about 16, I was addicted to playing massively multiplayer online role-playing games, or MMO RPGs for short. They were literally my life, and I considered my online friends very real, and I loved them. Except I lied to them practically the entire time. You see, I was pretending to be a girl, but not for the fun of it, but to target single teenage boys online for in-game currencies, gear, and whatever helped me progress through the game. Anyone who is an avid MMO gamer knows exactly what I'm talking about. Those amazing outfits you have to buy with real money, those materials that you had to buy with real money to progress through the game, and to be able to go up against the best of the best. I was addicted. I wanted all of it, except I couldn't get all of it. I couldn't buy it. My parents wouldn't agree to foot the bill, nor did I have a job as a teenager. So I devised a plan from around the age of 14 that I would pretend to be a teenage girl and get into seemingly realistic online relationships with teenage boys and try to coax them into sending me these things. I used the names and pictures of girls I found on their personal profiles on places like Flickr and Photobucket. Usually, when the boy decides to go snoop because he thinks I'm lying, he would find them and resort to believing that it was really me. They were already too desperate. I even voice chatted with some of them. Even though I was a boy going through puberty, my voice was still high-pitched enough to carry the lie. It was the perfect formula to trick them, all into liking me and gifting me. On my first MMO, I tricked a boy into sending me an outfit by pretending to be his girlfriend. This boy seemed madly in love with me, and since this was my first time trying this out, I genuinely felt bad for him. But my idiotic self decided that it would be alright for me to take advantage of this situation. It won't really hurt, right? At least that's what I thought. This huge identity scam that I created only escalated from there. I tricked so many other guys, teens and possibly even adult men pretending to be teens. It was horrible. I hated myself, but I couldn't stop. I needed all these gifts in these games. This is where the story actually starts. When I was 16, the last guy that I ever talked to was a 23-year-old Russian guy who we'll call Mark. I met Mark on a very popular shooting MMO. We hung out all the time and had many mutual friends within the game. We voice chatted with a group of people multiple times on Skype while playing. I never once decided to scam him because he was a free player, meaning he never spent money on the game. He also seemed like a genuinely nice dude. But when he asked me out, I tried to take on what I considered the biggest challenge in the scam. Will I be able to get a free player to spend on a game for me? Because I was always so well liked online, and many people knew who I was, and generally, I was categorized as a very nice girl. My ego was soaring. I knew I could do it. I accepted to date him online, despite him knowing that, as a 23-year-old man, he was speaking to what he thought was a 16-year-old girl. In the beginning, he was pretty normal. He was always trying to be sweet and romantic. We played together all the time. He did all those lovey-dovey kisses and hugs texts. We even had more adult-themed cyber interactions. I, being the piece of shit I used to be, just played along. It was all going really well. Too well. However, I noticed after a week or two that something was not right with him. He seemed obsessive. He seemed manipulative. He always talked trash about my other friends from the game and pressured me to unfriend them. He would always tell me that they talked the same mess behind my back. He would call them sluts, skanks, and many other horrible names. He would even send his version of proof, which I later found out were all photoshopped in-game text chats. He absolutely despised any guy I ever talked to when we were playing in a public match together, and I stupidly went along with it all. I didn't want him to not trust me. That way, it would be easier to get whatever it was that I wanted. Then, the perfect moment came for me to make Mark send me gifts. I had to do it. This new outfit the game introduced was too bomb to pass up. I started off by telling him the new game update was pretty cool, and we talked about it for a while. He suggested that we both get the new outfit, but I told him I had no money, and I totally would buy it for both of us if I could. That's when he suggested that he would steal the money from his mother, a single, hardworking woman taking care of 2 kids. For a second, my mind told me to just let it happen. This was when I immediately snapped out of it. I felt horrible. I decided to log off right then. I shut the laptop to rethink what I've done all these years. How many of these guys weren't part of well-off families and were likely using or stealing their parents' money? I couldn't stop pondering about this all day. And the next day, when I logged back into Skype at night, I was immediately slammed with walls and walls of text from Mark, asking me where I went, why I wasn't answering, how I'm such a slut who went to talk to some other guy that I know, and many similar things that you hear nice guys say to girls that give them a chance, then flake on them for being weird. I was sick to my stomach. I hated myself, and I hated Mark. I tried to play it off and say my electricity cut off for the entire day, but he didn't believe that. He didn't want to believe it. And at that point, I told him that I wanted to break up. Things only took a turn for the worse, though. He voice called me, and I picked up. He was hysterically crying and shouting. I tried to remain calm and tell him that I didn't want to play games with him anymore. I told him that I was getting more depressed than I already was and felt my addiction to games wasn't helping at all. That I should go out and see the world more, which was all true, outside of my fake persona. He started shouting at me some more, calling me all kinds of names. this 23-year-old Russian man was threatening what he perceived to be a 16-year-old girl. Everything he said devolved into something worse. He started talking about how I ruined his life. He told me that he would end it all if I ever left him. I started crying, told him not to. We got into a heated argument, and I could hear him breaking stuff all around him. I was still crying when I told him that I had to go. He told me not to leave, or he would end it all right there and now. He turned on his camera and put a razor to his wrist. I could see clearly all the leftover marks from old cuts on his arm. I was in fear. He couldn't see me, but I was stuck there watching a man threaten to cut his own wrist live on cam, all because of me. I quickly told him that I had to go. I cried in my room that entire day, realizing karma finally got to me, and that this is what I get for scamming people. I was a mess, and I sobbed until I eventually passed out on my bed. The next day, I was unusually calm. The day itself went by normally. I sat in front of my laptop but didn't open it. I tried to think of a rational solution to all of this. I didn't want someone to end their life just because of me. There was no rational solution. I just had to say goodbye to him and block him forever. Whatever happens, happens. I opened up Skype and was slammed by walls of text once again. This time, I didn't read anything, but I saw that he had sent some photos. These photos were graphic, and they obviously came from the night before after I ditched him. I felt sick and overwhelmed once again, but I took a deep breath and went into the next conversation as calmly as possible. When he got online, I told him that I was breaking up with him. Mark again told me how he was going to unalive himself if I ever dared to leave. I calmly told him that if he was going to, then why didn't he? He didn't answer, clearly shocked by the question itself. He continued to attempt to threaten me. I told him that he could find another girlfriend, but he only continued his barrage. I was fed up. I tried to reason with him, even was on the verge of revealing that I was actually a 16-year-old boy all along. But I decided that that likely wasn't the best thing to do. I regretfully told him that he should go end it all, so no other woman has to go through what he did to me. Then I blocked and deleted him. I deleted my Skype and never logged back in. Subsequently, I did see him online a few times on the games that I played. He tried to contact me again, but I continued to ignore him. He eventually deleted me off his friends list, and we never chatted again. At this point, I stopped pretending to be a girl and told all my friends online that I was a boy all along, and then continued to apologize profusely. The girls felt betrayed because they really trusted me. Most of the boys who I lied to felt betrayed as well because they liked me. But none of them really made a big deal out of it in the end. I realized how much of an asshole I was at the end for even coming up with this plan, but decided that I wasn't as much of an asshole as a 23-year-old man who threatened to unalive himself live on cam in front of a 16-year-old girl for trying to break off a pedophilic, abusive relationship. Like I've said over and over, I know that I played my part here, but Mark, if you ever hear this, get fucked, buddy. So this is something that I've kept completely to myself, save for a confused phone call to my best friend the morning after, to try and figure out if what I thought happened actually happened. Truthfully, the event that incited this incident was my fault, and also rather stupid. So I think I've been too embarrassed or mad at myself to share the story. However, if me sharing keeps somebody from making the same set of mistakes, I think I need to swallow my pride. I had only been living in New Orleans for about 2-ish weeks the night that this occurred, and while I'd never been to New Orleans once in my life prior to moving there, I'm from a similarly large metro area in the American South, so I'm familiar with the dynamic of a city like this. One minute, you'll see kids playing catch in the streets and young couples walking arm in arm down tropically adorned sidewalks. And the next moment, dilapidated houses, gang violence, young men posted up on street corners, and unimaginable poverty tied to rampant drug abuse. In the end, it's just all about knowing where to go and which areas to avoid entirely. Anyway, I was driving home from running some obscure errand at night around 9:30 p.m. that caused me to drive through St. Claude. For anyone that doesn't know, this is certainly one of those neighborhoods that should be avoided, if at all possible. As I came upon a stop sign right next to a small community center/food bank, I suddenly slammed on the brakes due to driver's instinct before really even understanding why I did it. Standing there, just feet away from my front bumper, was a teeny tiny cat. Its wide eyes staring back at me in terror as it became briefly blinded by my headlights. This is where my own stupidity comes into play. I didn't really know where I was and how dangerous of an area that it happened to be, and without even thinking for a single damn moment, I stepped outside of the car to assess the situation, maybe see if I could help the little guy. I didn't even remove my keys from the ignition, as I figured I'd only be there for a moment. Didn't think to grab my phone from the charger. I figured I'd either be able to beckon over the little cat and help it, or watch it dart away before slipping back into the car and continuing my journey home. What I didn't realize when I knelt down on the pavement was that my clumsy self was too close to the barely open car door, and when I stood up, I bumped it, and it immediately swung shut. No big deal, I thought, convincing myself that the door would be unlocked, only to feel my whole heart sink like a stone into my stomach when the door didn't budge. I didn't panic immediately, but after trying all 4 doors and cursing myself for a solid minute for being such an idiot, I spotted a man sitting on the steps of the community center eating, and he spotted me. Noticing my situation, he slowly stood and came to the back of my car with his bag of Raising Cane's chicken, plopped it down on the hood, and proceeded to enjoy his dinner on the back of my Subaru. I'd already been there for a good 10 minutes at this point, so honestly, the company of another person was actually relieving. I didn't look as helpless to passerbys with him there, at least that's what I thought. For context, I'm 5 feet tall and was wearing a tiny tank top to fend off the brutal New Orleans summer heat. After I explained my situation, he explained that he could try to jimmy rig the door open, and desperate to get back in, I agreed to this plan. It was useless, unfortunately, and I could tell that he was just fiddling around. I trotted over to a small church across the intersection, where I spotted a few people closing up for the night. Sanctuary, I thought. Nice churchgoers have to help a woman lost and alone, right? Wrong. The man locking up looked straight through me, back at the man now clearly trying to open a locked car, shook his head and shot me a glance that said, "Do you think I'm stupid?" and stepped right into his unlocked vehicle. It was at this point that I felt the tears welling up, but quickly told myself to suck it up as I walked dejectedly back over to my car. By the grace of God, the random stranger let me use his phone to call a locksmith, one tastefully called Pop-A-Lock, who told me that they'd be there anywhere between 45 minutes and 4 hours from now. Great. After about 25 minutes of chit-chatting, the man informed me that his shift was about to start, and just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone. This is when the gravity of my situation really began to sink in, and I became acutely aware of my surroundings. Acutely aware of the men who had been circling the block on their bicycles during our conversation. I don't know about you, but I don't know many grown men who ride around leisurely on bikes after 10 p.m. just for the fun of it, especially not in the same big circles in the same neighborhood. I heard the distant squeak of wheels, and before I could duck for cover, they had lapped the block again, now aware that I was, in fact, utterly alone. They continued down the block, and I realized quickly that I needed to find somewhere to be by the time that they returned. I swiftly walked towards the community center, where I'd planned on sitting on the stairs, but I quickly realized that it was entirely too illuminated, and I'd be making myself a beacon amid the darkness of the neighborhood. Plus, as I rounded the corner, I saw a tall man standing in total darkness along the side of the building, simply staring straight forward, facing the steps, not even 10 feet away from them. Getting desperate now, I jogged over to the church, and hearing the wheels nearing again, I squatted down behind the big sign in front of the building. As I sat there in the dirt, I couldn't help it anymore, and cried just a little bit. The combination of fear and frustration really put me over the edge. After a while, though, I didn't hear any more movement, and because my butt hurt from sitting on the ground, and the bugs were starting to come out beneath me, I decided to move spots like some stupid game of hide and seek. I had spotted a fenced-off area that appeared to belong to a restaurant that had obviously closed by this time. And after finding the gate to the outdoor section to be unlocked, I darted inside and latched it behind me, sighing with relief. At that point, I situated myself at a table where I could peer through the fence at my car to see if the locksmith pulled up, and then I waited. I waited, and I waited. After about 2 hours, the horrifying realization dawned on me that I'd only made one singular call to the Popolok people, and I gave a vague description of the intersection where I was at. What if they couldn't find me? What if they had already driven past long ago, and not seeing me there, were long gone by now? I didn't know if I should keep waiting or venture back out in hopes of catching them if they were circling the block looking for my car. After about 30 minutes of indecision, I decided that I would just have to go out there. The men were gone, and although it was a bad neighborhood, it'd just get progressively worse come the early hours of the morning, and I didn't exactly want to find that out. It's so painfully obvious in retrospect, but of course, the moment I left the safety of my little restaurant hideaway, those damn wheels began to round the corner. I literally could not have looked more out of place and vulnerable. I felt so exposed, but there was no time to go back across the intersection to the fenced-off area, and to get to the church, I'd have to run right through the bike path of the two men. As I sprinted toward my car, a black truck rolled by and began to slowly roll back in my direction. I almost resigned myself to my seemingly inevitable capture, assault, and God knows what, as I watched that vehicle roll toward me. I pretended to walk away, as if I were not utterly aimless, trying to give off the impression that I wasn't locked out of my still-running car without any and all resources. The men on the bikes were so close now. But then, just as if out of a scene of a movie, the Popolok truck rounded the corner. I instantly began waving my arms to flag them down, and as that ominous truck drove off, my savior parked his van. Apparently, he'd been looping around the area for 20 minutes, trying to find me, and was about to give up to go help another stranded woman. If I had stayed behind the fence, he likely would have, and I would have been left without any means of communication to call anyone else for help. The moment I got inside my beloved Subaru, I began sobbing at the heavenly sound of the lock clicks behind me. God, it was pure relief to be secured within my own locked space. Even as I'm sharing this now, I feel as if I'm being rather dramatic, almost as if I was freaking out over nothing. But in working through my own recollection, parsing through the details, it does help to validate my experience. While I love animals, I don't anticipate being so haphazard if I come across a wayward pet again, and I certainly won't be getting out of the car without bringing my keys with me. Lesson learned. This happened back in 2015. I, a female, was about 20 years old at the time, and I'll give you some context before letting you know what actually happened. I was studying in a lovely seaside city in France, and everyone used bicycles as their main mode of transportation, cycling to work, school, parties, etc. It was a rather safe place, full of both tourists and students. I lived and studied in the city between 2012 and 2015. Up until the events that I'm going to mention, I never felt unsafe, nor did I hear anything of the sort from any of my friends either. In December of 2014, my boyfriend took me to his engineering school's Christmas party. We were amongst a large group of friends and mingled a lot. One of the guys from the group, one whom I didn't know personally, left the party without any notice. A month later, he was found dead in the harbor, and the police never figured out what had happened to him. I went online to check if there was any news, and it's still a cold case to this day. I didn't know him, but I think about this all the time. Was it because he was alone? Did he fall into the water, or did someone push him? Why didn't anyone care to walk home with him that night? Needless to say, the city started to feel a whole lot less safe afterwards. But at 20 years old, I didn't have the same understanding of such things as I do now, as a person well into my adulthood. My life just carried on. A couple of months passed, and it was the beginning of 2015. A friend of mine was assaulted badly while cycling back home after a party. He was found in critical condition, his body lying halfway on the road, half on the sidewalk. He had serious head trauma after it appeared that someone stomped his head while on the sidewalk. His jaw was completely shattered. This guy was a big guy in every sense of the word, not the sort of man that you could push around easily. When he was recovering in the hospital, he couldn't make sense of what had happened. He had no idea why he was attacked on his bike, and the police didn't find any suspect or suspects. 2 students, my age, same friend circles, brutally assaulted for no reason at all. I still biked everywhere because I had no other choice. I lived about 8 kilometers away from my school, and I didn't have any other means of transportation. This meant that I cycled approximately 16 to 20 kilometers every day, something that I'd been doing since 2012. We're now in the spring of 2015. I'm biking back home from a party with my boyfriend. I've had a few drinks, but I'm not drunk. I'm just tired, and my boyfriend is annoying me because he's not waiting up for me. The distance between our 2 bikes just keeps growing, when suddenly, someone jumps on me. This man appears from nowhere, and he kicks my bike to the ground. Now, I'm a skilled cyclist at this point. I'm used to handling my bike, so I let it fall between my legs. But I myself don't wreck into the asphalt. I resist and try to land on my feet. I don't know who this man is, but it's obvious that he doesn't have my best interests at heart. I instinctively reach for my bike, which is now lying on the ground. I'm trying to get a hold of the handlebars. This man kicks me, then my hand. He kicks again and again, but I'm already holding the handlebars. It hurts, but I'm doing my best to lift the bike. He says something that my brain can't quite make out. I don't hear it, but the sounds that he made were filled with hatred and anger. I see my boyfriend looking at me. He's a bit far off, but he stopped cycling. I figure that he's going to turn and help me, and this man will see that I'm not alone. I'm still standing and lifting my bike. It's been maybe 2 or 3 seconds since the man initially jumped on me. That's when my boyfriend and I catch eyes, and then he turns his back on me. My heart drops as he starts pedaling away. It's the dead of night, and there's no one else around. It clicks that I'm on my own now. The man just keeps kicking. He obviously wants me to let go of the bike. My hand is black and blue, but my grip is strong. I think about the other 2 students. They give me strength in the situation. I think about my boyfriend. The sight of him cycling away fills me with pure rage. I'll use this rage. The man is holding some sort of glass bottle in his hand. I grab it with my free hand and smash it into his face. I'm furious. I'm not sure what was in the bottle, but that's not important, because when it broke upon impact, it surely splintered into his eyes. Now I have a split second to launch myself and begin pedaling away. He can't reach my hand anymore, so he opts to kick my bike one more time. But I stand strong on the pedals. He tries to give chase, but I'm much faster, especially now that he doesn't have the element of surprise on his side. I pedal and pedal until I can no longer breathe. I pedal until I feel numb, and finally reach my residence. That night, I know that I escaped something terrible. Due to the stress, I couldn't even describe the man. I'll never know for sure if my experience was linked to the other attacks. However, it's important to note, we were all walking and cycling on the same exact route. 10 years later, I can still recall the look on my ex-boyfriend's face when he turned his back on me. I can honestly say, I hope to never meet either of these two men again. I work at a retail store, and I absolutely detest my job with every ounce of my heart. And because I was dumb upon hire, doing my best to play team player, I said that I was always available, so they routinely stick me with night shifts. But I whine and bitch and moan and digress. I guess I'm okay working nights since I get to see my boyfriend when he picks me up afterwards. My boyfriend usually gets off of his job at 10:30, but oftentimes doesn't leave work until 11. So on those nights, I'd end up waiting for him for a good 40 to 45 minutes after I got off of work. He'd call me to tell me that he was coming, and also to make sure that I was still alive. Well, one random night, an Uber driver pulled up and asked me if I was someone named Lenore. I told him no, but his reply was, "Am I sure?" Bro, how am I not going to be sure of my own name? Fortunately, right at that instant, my boyfriend pulled in and gave me the honk, causing creepy Uber driver to speed away. I'm a paranoid penny, so this made me wonder if maybe that driver had been watching me and knew my boyfriend always came late. That was something that I pondered for a moment and then tried to put to the back of my head. But fast forward 3 days later, and I'm standing there after work in the parking lot of the shopping plaza where I work, listening to some music, waiting for boyfriend to come pick me up or give me a call with his ETA. He finally does call me, and he begins cracking a joke about how he's glad that creepy Uber driver didn't answer my phone. As we start shooting the shit and joking, that's when this woman of Indian descent walks up. I don't see her at first. In fact, I don't hear her either, as I was wearing noise-canceling headphones at the time. She gets closer and keeps calling to me, when finally she yells, "Hey!" I look over at her and smile, before going back to talking to my boyfriend. She does it again. That's when I excuse myself. "Hi, can I help you?" "Do you need a ride?" she asks. She looks nice enough, but something just didn't settle with me. Her car was parked at the stop sign, and there was clearly someone else in it. "Oh, no, my friend is coming for me, but thank you." I notice there's a man in the driver's seat of her car, and that she isn't wearing a uniform from either of the two shops that are near us. She begins to ask again, "Are you sure? I can give you a ride. Do you need a ride? Get in." I begin to feel a little uncomfortable at this, and my preschool don't get in a stranger's car training kicks right in. So I politely decline and go back to speaking to my boyfriend. "So, are you close?" He tells me that he just pulled out of his job, that he'll get there soon, and that I should just stay on the line with him. The last thing that he asks me is that woman gone yet? No, she wasn't gone. In fact, she was standing a mere 6 feet away, watching me, and she looked annoyed now. I told him in code that no, she's still there, leaning on the car, just watching me. And she's looking angrier and angrier with each passing second. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the man tell her something, and that's when she begins to interrogate me. "Your friend's not here. Do you need that ride? Where's your friend? He probably forgot about you. That's okay. We'll give you a ride. It's cold. You should just get in. Tell us where you live. We can drop you off." At this point, she begins to inch closer to me. I try my best to avoid her, by moving to the farther end of the plaza strip. "Honey, yeah, so about my sister. Well, she's gotten closer, but I'm pretty scared. She's too far away from home. Something might happen. Hurry, so I can tell you." That's the code that I relay to my boyfriend as this woman's car drives up. Now she looks pissed. "Get in the car now. We'll give you a ride." At this point, she opens the car door and begins trying to get me inside, pulling me, yanking on my jacket. She's a taller and bigger woman, so at this point she tries to pick me up. My bowels threaten to release, and I'm screaming, kicking, and wiggling. Meanwhile, I can hear my boyfriend yelling at me that he's coming and that he's calling the police. Now my mind is running 1,000 miles an hour, and I'm panicking, thinking I'm going to be assaulted or be some weird present for this woman's husband, since he looks rather content with her effort to kidnap me. "Get in and shut up. You need a ride. Be quiet. You want to see our house? Very nice." I start crying as she manages to get my torso in the car. My right hand is locked on my phone, and she begins trying to take it from me. I can hear my boyfriend's panic through the phone, telling me that the police are sending an officer. This woman shoves my face into her leather seat. Now my airway is obstructed, and she's not letting me go. Like I said, she's bigger than me, stronger than me, and she knows it. Her entire weight is right on top of me. I try not to panic so I don't black out from lack of oxygen. And all of a sudden, I start getting mad as shit. Her husband says something in Punjabi as she lifts one hand up and leans down trying to get something from the front seat. I immediately take this opportunity to push myself off the seat and jab her in her stomach with my elbow. She recoils, letting go of me just a little bit, and I use this chance to headbutt her, tossing my big melon back as I scream, fear-stricken and adrenaline-hazed. "That's my purse. I don't know you." Finally, my boyfriend pulls into the lot, able to see the last efforts of me trying to free myself from this woman. I leave her in a heap on the ground, obviously nursing her now busted nose. I bolt to his car, slam the door as I throw myself into the front seat, and he speeds off towards his house. Once we get there, I break down, babbling about how scared and terrifying this entire experience was. How, if I hadn't seized that opportunity, she might have gotten me in that car, only to do God knows what. After this incident, the police officer that had been dispatched got to the parking lot about 20 minutes after, and of course, didn't find a single person, although he did report finding a pool of blood where this encounter began. My boyfriend ultimately talked to his boss and was granted the ability to leave early on my behalf. I'm still weirded out by cars stalling in the plaza. I also don't know whether to be upset or proud of myself that my war cry was a line from King of the Hill. While I don't anticipate running into this Indian couple ever again, for anybody out there that might, if a woman with an Indian accent and a clearly disfigured nose ever approaches you and asks you if you'd like a ride, don't get in the car. Hi, my name is Tom, and I live in the sunny state of Arizona, a place that I've called home for pretty much my entire life. I wanted to share a story that happened to me that nearly screwed up my life forever. When I was 21 years old, I broke up with my first ever serious girlfriend, who I had been together with for 8 months. Needless to say, I was devastated by this. I fell into a deep depression, and I began abusing painkillers and Xanax really, really heavily. I also began looking for any chick that I could find to rebound with. At that point, I ended up looking on the personal section of Craigslist, and I found an ad for a girl named Stephanie. I began talking to her, and one night I arranged for her to come pick me up and hook up. That night, we had fun and we mutually decided to make it a regular thing. She was a bit older than me, I'd say 35. She was a bigger girl, but she had her own apartment and enough money to keep me loaded on as many drugs and as much alcohol as I wanted. To be honest, I sort of used this lady as a sugar mama, for lack of a better term. After a while, she grew really attached to me and started to want more of a serious style relationship. Eventually, she started dropping hints about wanting to get married. She said she wanted to do this to help me out, so that she could get me onto her insurance and get me help for my drug and alcohol problem, which I promptly refused to consider. One day, we got into a big argument, and she told the police that I had been abusing her, and she filed a temporary restraining order on me. A week after she did this, she called my phone crying her eyes out, saying to please forgive her, that she loved me, and all this other stuff. She said that she wanted to come pick me up, get me some dope, some alcohol, and pick me up something to eat. Of course, being the addict that I am, I accepted. From the moment that she picked me up, I noticed that she was acting kind of odd. This woman was usually really talkative and was always on my ass, wanting to talk to me about this and about that. But this particular day, she was oddly quiet. When we got back to her apartment, the moment after I walked in, she pushed me onto the couch, pulled my pants down, and began to have her way with me. Before she climbed on top of me, began riding me, and ultimately getting incredibly angry when I didn't finish the way that she wanted me to. I'd been getting bad vibes from her the entire time that we were together that night. So after all of this happened, I immediately asked her for a ride back home, which she quickly agreed to. After I got dropped off at the house, I went inside and sat down with my younger sister to watch some SpongeBob with her. Well, after about 10 minutes of quiet, I get a call on the phone from a number that I don't recognize. I picked it up, and to my surprise, the lady on the other end of the line said that she was with the county police department and that they were going to need me to come outside to talk to them. I immediately ran downstairs, hid my weed and my pills, and then walked outside to figure out what the hell was going on. The moment that I walked outside, there were 7 different cops on my porch, and they were all pointing tasers and guns at me. One of them hit me in the back of my leg with a nightstick and put me on the ground before handcuffing me. The cops then talked to my mom, got permission to go inside the house, where they took a drug dog and began doing a thorough search of my room and the basement area. None of the cops on the scene would tell me what was going on whenever I would ask a question about why they were there. They just told me that I'd have to talk to the detective down at the station. Once I got to the police department, I had a bombshell dropped on me. Apparently, this lady Stephanie had accused me of kidnapping her and SAing her. She told the police that she had come by my house to return some of my stuff because we had just recently broken up, and that I had come out, held a knife to her throat, forced my way into her vehicle before taking her back to her apartment and viciously assaulting her repeatedly. Thankfully, I remembered that we had made a few stops on the way back to her apartment. She had gone inside a gas station to get a couple packs of cigarettes with me, so there was no way that I could have kidnapped her. The police still swabbed my junk for DNA. They also took my clothes for evidence, and I was forced to spend the night in the county jail, wearing nothing but hospital scrubs. I was released the next morning, but my ordeal was far from over. This lady began constantly stalking me. She would call me every night at odd hours from blocked numbers, either crying into the phone or begging me to talk to her. I also began seeing her vehicle quite a lot in the neighborhood, even though she lives nowhere close to me. I called the police about this a couple of times, but they didn't really seem to care, telling me that I'd have to go get a restraining order on her in order to make this stop. I wanted nothing to do with the court system, though, due to my own criminal record. I just decided to ignore her and hope that the problem would go away on its own. After a few months, she did stop bothering me as much. However, even now, I get calls at 2 or 3 in the morning from blocked numbers randomly. And every new girlfriend that I get, Stephanie messages them on Facebook, being sure to tell them how I had assaulted her. The moral of my story is to be careful who you meet online. Whether you're a guy or a girl, all it takes is one crazy person to completely ruin your life. I just moved into a new house over the weekend. Just paid my first month's rent and security deposit. I signed a year lease. The house itself is pretty okay, considering it was built nearly 100 years ago. Lots of work to be done on it, weird layout, unfinished porch. Okay, it's actually kind of a shitty house. But I had to take what I could get. When I saw the house posted on Craigslist, I immediately called the number listed and asked if I could view it that day or another day during the week. Right off the bat, the dude gives me a bad vibe. Not exactly creepy yet, but definitely annoying. We arranged to meet that Saturday so he could show me the inside of the house. He texted me every day leading up to it, multiple times, to quote, "Make sure you're absolutely certain you want to view the house, because I don't want my time wasted." I assure him several times that I literally live 5 minutes away, and I'll be there on Saturday, no doubt about it. I should mention, I found the house for me and my elderly father, who's in a wheelchair. When I got to the house Saturday, the landlord was out in the yard waiting with a huge smile on his face. I waved hello, and then went around to my passenger side door to help my father out of the car and into his chair. The landlord's face rapidly devolves into a scowl. As we approach him, my dad holds out his hand for a handshake. When the landlord looks at me and says, "I thought it was just you," while completely ignoring my father. I awkwardly try to explain that I didn't think to mention it, since he didn't ask. So he goes ahead and shows us the house. It's livable, so we give him the deposit then and there. All seems well. We moved in over the weekend, paid the rent on the subsequent Tuesday. The landlord told me that he would need access to the house today to do some plumbing work. I say, no worries, but I'll be at work, so I'll leave the key above the door. I typically get off at around 12:30, and I told him as such. When at around 10, he texted me again wanting me to confirm that I was absolutely not going to be there before 12:30 because of a safety hazard. I say yes, I'll be there a bit after 12:30. Well, I actually ended up getting off of work fairly early this day. I was headed home at around 11 and figured that I'd just pop my head in and tell the landlord I was here, but I would stay outside. Now, remember when I said that the layout of the house was weird? It's because the front door leads directly into a bedroom. This is my bedroom. There's another door to the left, and that's the living room, which leads into the kitchen and a back room/bathroom. So I turn the doorknob, and it's unlocked. When I walked in, all I see is my landlord hightailing it out of my room, through the living room, kitchen, back room, and out the back door. I then see his car race out of my driveway. Absolutely sketched out, I walk back into my bedroom, only to find my underwear drawer open and the contents strewn about. My nightstand was open too. I don't know what to do at this point because I'm kind of stuck here. It's hard to find housing with my credit, and even harder finding a place that is wheelchair accessible for my father. I'm so lost at what I should do that I'm opening this up to all the internet strangers out there. Advice, recommendations. Please share it all. Update. I want to start this out by thanking those of you that have reached out to me. Your support and guidance truly helped at a time where I was absolutely lost. Without going into too much detail, due to the fact that this situation is now pending litigation and potential criminal charges, I will confirm that my landlord was not in my room handling any plumbing. Rather, he was likely planting, adjusting, or collecting surveillance cameras. These trinkets were likely planted just a day before we moved in, and I happened upon them due to the fact that he fled from my room the way that he did when I had returned home from work. Going on advice that I received here, I picked up a few cameras of my own for documentation purposes and personal safety. We attached these outside of the front door, back door, and the street-facing windows on the property. It didn't take long for me to be glad that we took that step. Within 48 hours of putting them up, the cameras caught something that would have given me a heart attack in a movie, let alone happening in my own real life. At 2 a.m. one night, the camera right outside of the main door caught the landlord showing up to the property, walking right up to my bedroom window and attempting to peer in. It wasn't a momentary glance either. He stood pressed up against the window for a solid 10 minutes, looking about, around, and from multiple angles. Luckily, we weren't home at that time. I don't know what I would have done if I got that motion alert and someone was a mere inches and a pane of glass from my head. I've since retained a lawyer, turned over my footage, and we now await our next steps. With this footage in hand, my lawyer has pretty much assured me that things will go in my favor. I'm working on getting my father approved for disability, and several kind internet folks in my area have even offered us temporary and permanent housing. I cannot express enough to you guys just how thankful I am for all your help. Even the people commenting negative things. You all helped light a fire under my ass to be proactive. This is likely the only update that you're going to get of this story. Thank you for listening, and thank you even more if you were one of those that helped. The final selection for this episode is a misconnection post from the St. Louis, Missouri area, dating back to 2018. I don't have much context beyond what's shared within the posting, and while I'm not sure whether this falls strictly in the creepy category, I feel like it was worth sharing. I'll let you be the judge though, and be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. Male for female, St. Louis. I'm looking for a woman that I met at our local Schnucks market. I first noticed you walking down the produce aisle. Beautiful blonde hair, light blue cardigan, pulled tight, a yellow floral dress cut above the knee. Not asking for attention, but wouldn't shy away from it if presented. I could work with that. You purposely brushed my arm as you reached for a head of lettuce. I could immediately feel the connection between us, like a spark that had been there for 100,000 years. You responded, "Oh, pardon me. No need to be coy, dear. I know you just wanted to feel your skin against mine." I could hear the want in your voice. I should have just taken your hints and initiated conversation right then and there, but I decided to play it safe. I looked into your angelic blue eyes and murmured the only thing I could muster: no worries. And there will never be any worries when we're together. As you pulled away to continue your shopping, you flipped your hair and I caught a smell of lavender. I never knew how much that smell enticed me until this day. It became my favorite smell in the entire world. I paced you through the rest of your shopping trip, far enough not to be noticed, trying to decide if I should capitalize on your advances and introduce myself. But before I could build up the courage, you were in the checkout line. I cut my own shopping short so I could get in the lane next to you. I just needed to be close to you, not blow my chance that you've set up for me, and try to get close enough to smell you once again. The checkout guy was making small talk, being vaguely flirty. I couldn't believe the fucking nerve of this guy. Flirting with you, my love, my life, right in front of me. It took everything I had not to tear his goddamn voice box out right there in aisle 6. But I kept my cool and the encounter was quickly fleeting. We walked out of the market at the same time, you acting like you didn't notice me, playing hard to get. So cute. You parked your blue PT Cruiser 3 cars down from mine. What a coincidence. Maybe you knew it was my car and wanted me to notice. Maybe it was fate. I followed you the entire 7.8 miles to your neighborhood. You live in a modest little bi-level, the last house on a dead-end road. I simply had to talk to you. I couldn't let this opportunity pass. I built up the nerve to ring the doorbell, but much to my surprise, a young girl of about 10 answered the door. I knew she had to be yours. She was a spitting image of you. She's going to grow into a beautiful woman someday. I'm certain of this. I ask if her mother's home, and as she turns to go fetch you, I sprint down the street as to not be seen. I chickened out yet again. The idea of you having a daughter has brought up so many questions, love. Are you married? Do you love someone else aside from me? That's supposed to be our daughter, our house. How could you let some other man be that intimate with you behind my fucking back? The thoughts dissipate as I see you come to the front porch and look around. You act as if you don't see me, but I know you do. The way you hike up your skirt, just an inch, as you climb the stairs, lets me know you know what I want. I couldn't get the nerve to go back to the door, so I returned the next morning. As I sit in my car with the sun rising behind me, I see the porch light flip on, and out you come to start your car, wearing nothing but a bathrobe. Is this for me? Did you know I was going to be there? An apology for relationships that should have been mine? It was just a few seconds, but seeing what you decided to show me, I couldn't help but relieve myself to you, right there in my car. I'm sure that this is what you wanted. I'm catching on to your little game, so I'm going to add a stipulation of my own. As I'm not sure you read Craigslist, I'll throw out another way of getting into contact with me. I know the sexual chemistry is there. I know the want is there. If you want me as much as I want you, wear that blue cardigan. I'll take that as my sign, as my green light. And I'll rush you back into your house and do all the things that you've been begging me to do to you through all of your little nuances. The blue cardigan. I'll be watching. XO, XO. This all happened when I was about 8 or 9 years old. My parents, little brother, and I lived in a small house on a pretty busy road. Our landlord and his wife lived next door, and the neighbors on the other side of us were pretty good family friends. We all kind of noticed that our landlord, Ray, had a thing for my mom, although it was something we never really paid too much attention to. This was the same year that my parents got divorced. All 3 bedrooms in our house were on the main floor, with an extra room in the basement. When my dad moved out, my mom moved her room to the basement and created a toy room for my brother and myself in the room that was once theirs. On the weekends, my brother and I would sleep in the toy room, as there was a TV in there where we would play our video games and watch movies. My dad had maybe been gone a month at this point, and my brother and I were having a normal Friday night in our toy room. We were watching a movie when, all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed what looked like a bright light grazing our window. I was laying closest to the window, so all I had to do was sit up and I'd be able to see into our backyard. It wasn't a lit up backyard, and it backed up to the yard of the people who lived behind us. Being a curious child, I decided to look out the window to see if maybe I could figure out where the light came from. My brother asked me what I was doing before sitting up to join me. When no sooner did he get to the window, the light shone right in our eyes. We now knew that it was a flashlight. We were frozen in fear, and while we sat there paralyzed for what felt like minutes on end, it was likely no more than 10 seconds before we backed up and tried to pretend that what had just happened didn't just happen. The next day, we told our mom what we remembered, and she called our other neighbor, Jerry, and he came over to see if maybe he could investigate. He came right over and told my mom that he had been outside smoking a cigarette at that time and noticed someone lurking around in our yard. He discreetly made his way over to the fence, and when he saw the flashlight shining into our window, it was then that he could see that it was Ray. Jerry chased Ray off and waited to make sure that he wasn't coming back. This is something that we were all shaken by, but decided not to address it until something further happened. Some time went by and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but unfortunately, it didn't stop there. One day, while my mom was in the shower, I was in my toy room playing with my brother. I had to use the bathroom, so I decided to use the one in the basement. When, as soon as I walked out of my room, I saw Ray standing outside of the main bathroom door, as if he was just waiting for my mom. We locked eyes in the hallway. I froze and stared at him. He just smiled this creepy smile at me before saying, "I just came to ask your mom a question, but I'll just wait until later," before walking back down the hallway and leaving our house. Now, this kind of thing continued for about a month. We would come home from school, and Ray would be sitting on our porch. He'd walk into our house at random times during the day, often without even knocking. He'd use his key, since our door was pretty much always locked. You know, not inviting someone to come in. One night, I even caught him peering through our big bay window into our living room. Apparently, we weren't the only ones that noticed. My mom said that when she would go to the store or go out to eat or head to the mall, that Ray would mysteriously be there. She had had enough at that point and decided that now was the time to move. She broke the lease and discreetly moved to a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood, one with lots of other children. We thought we were safe there. When, a couple of months after moving and living in peace, we were all outside in the front yard one day, talking and playing with neighbors, when a familiar gray van slowly drove past our house. We all recognized it. It was Ray's. He must have followed us at some point to figure out our new location. He would drive by every day, sometimes even multiple times. My mom finally called the police. I'm not sure what they did about it, but all of this stopped shortly after that, and we never saw Ray again. As far as the flashlight incident goes, I firmly believe that he knew that the toy room was once my parents' room, although he was unaware that my mom had relocated to the basement. He was undoubtedly looking for her, and with the bathroom incident, who knows what would have happened if I hadn't come out of my room when I did, or if my brother and I hadn't been in the house at all. When I was in my early 20s and living in Chicago, I wasn't making much money. When I found this apartment, it felt like it was too good to be true. The top floor of a duplex with 6 rooms for $775 a month. The agent who showed me the apartment stressed to me that the landlords were a very religious couple. I didn't have a problem with that, even if the agent made it sound a little ominous. The landlords were an elderly couple that lived downstairs. They seemed okay at first. When I saw them in the yard, they would smile at me. I did my best to take good care of the house. Then, when they saw I was having my boyfriend over, things started to get really weird. One day, I was in my office writing. That's when I hear a knock at the door. I open it, and it's the old lady from downstairs. Before I can even say hello, She says, "Have you ever gotten an abortion?" I shut the door in her face immediately. No thanks. Although I'd only learn later that this was a colossal mistake. The house was laid out kind of weird. There was a door at the bottom of a flight of stairs that I thought led to a communal laundry room. But after accidentally opening it, I discovered it led directly into my landlord's living room. I unfortunately learned this the hard way. I was in my kitchen cooking. My boyfriend was at work, and I was by myself when I heard what sounded like the click of a door. "Okay," I say out loud. "What the f*** was that?" I didn't really make the connection that it could have been the door that led into their living room. I walk into the hallway and look around. I don't see anyone at the end of the hallway. I poke my head into all of the rooms. Nobody there. Then I look down the staircase leading to their house, and the neighbor lady is standing right there, just staring me down. I instinctively screamed. She flinched at the sound, stepping back into her apartment and swinging the door shut. After that, every time I left the house, and keep in mind, I spent every possible moment out of the house after that incident, I would come back and something would have been moved in my apartment. A window would be shut. Once, the shower was dripping, and my towel was damp. I couldn't lock the door because, since it was technically a door to their house, they were the only ones with the key. The knocking at my door got so frequent, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, that me and my boyfriend propped up an old mattress so that we wouldn't have to hear it while we slept. The second to last straw was when I opened the door for work, and the stairs were gone. I physically couldn't leave my house because there were no stairs. They had been dismantled and were sitting on the porch. I called the landlords repeatedly, but they didn't answer once. Finally, their son came out of the house and explained that they were doing some remodeling of the porch. He told me I had to cut through their apartment downstairs if I wanted to leave. I descended the stairs and opened the door, only to find the old couple both sitting there at their filthy kitchen table, just staring blankly at me. The house phone was in its cradle. They must have heard it ringing, but they just kept staring at me with this absent look on their face. I crossed their kitchen and left out their back door, returning their stare as I did. A few days later, I came home from my job and noticed that the bathroom floor was almost completely flooded, as if someone left a faucet on, or even the shower on. The old woman, seeing that I had come home, immediately came upstairs and knocked, screaming at me that I had flooded the bathroom and that her son had to come fix it. I was so run down at this point that I just told her it was fine. Her son comes by a few hours later, absolutely shit-faced. I open the door and tell him that I need an hour or so before he comes in. And that's when he picks something up and swings it directly at me. It was a massive wrench. I somehow duck out of the way and he stumbles over, likely because he's drunk. I book it down the newly repaired stairs as quickly as possible and call the police from the safety of down the block. They come by and take down a complaint, but claim that since there was no physical contact, that they couldn't do anything. I learned later that the old couple has a daughter on the force. In the middle of the night, me, my boyfriend, and several of his friends packed up all of our stuff into a Chevy Astro. We lived in hotels in the van for a month until we found another house. I'm guessing that that's what it took for that old couple to take the hint, seeing as after we left, they never attempted to reach out to us ever again. I knew it from the moment that he opened the door. I saw it in his eyes plain as day. He was considerate and polite, but I saw a sort of mechanical touch to it. One part as if he was used to this, one part as if he was really trying hard to hide his true self and to be sociable. His mouth told me one thing, but I was interested in what his eyes told me, and they told me that he was lying. Then I saw it in the way his house smelled, foul and musty, like a window hadn't been opened in a long time. I could sense more than a hint of mold. There was a carefully arranged stack of papers right by the entryway, but everything else was in shambles. I just told myself that nobody had done a proper cleaning in a very long time, and I was right. There were spiders in some corners of the residence, but others were completely tidy, something that I found strange. The room that I rented in the house was no bigger than a cupboard, but I had to take it. I was new to the country, staying at a local inn and trying to find a place to rent. This was the only place available on such short notice, so I took my chances. I like to think that I'm a fairly good judge of character, so I knew within the first few minutes that this guy had issues. But I also knew that he was intelligent. I could see it. His eyes were sparking, and in most people who have a spark in their eyes, it's either one of intelligence or madness. The fact that he was shifting between the two absolutely sent shivers down my spine. The first day, he told me that he had to attend a conference in another country, so he'd be gone for about 2 weeks. Apparently, there was another tenant, a lady in her 50s, and she wasn't around very much. Great, I thought. I can have the house pretty much to myself, get the chance to have my girlfriend over without anybody bothering us, and also be able to settle in and explore the surroundings. Just what I liked. Peace and quiet. That morning brought on the first major red flag. He asked me to read the water, electricity, and gas meters every night, and to write the numbers on a piece of paper, because apparently he liked to keep an eye on things. I said fine. The guy is into this. I don't care. Perhaps it was my mistake that I dismissed it so easily. Well into these first 2 weeks, the other lady finally came around. Cindy. She was rather lovely. She just radiated an optimistic and positive aura, and I liked chatting with her and exchanging a few pleasantries whenever we passed. She raised the second red flag for me when she told me that our landlord told her that she couldn't ever take a bath, only showers. The 2 weeks that he was gone came and went. It was the beginning of October, but the weather was already quite chilly. As soon as he returned, he began asking me whether I had turned the heating on. I told him that I did, because I was cold. No, we don't do that. We can't turn the heating on now. What will we do when it's truly cold? I get that, but my room is the coldest in the house, and I'm actually freezing. Well, you can't expect to live in a sauna. I don't want to live in a sauna. I just want to feel warm. I wake up with a chill running through my bones every morning. Well, there are other ways of getting warm, and you can't expect to be warm when you're sleeping naked. Okay, hold up. How did he know how I slept? At this point, it was clear to me that I underestimated the craziness of this man, so there was no point in continuing. Instead, I asked him for a thermometer to see how cold it really was in my room. Turns out, it was between 15 and 16 degrees Celsius. For my friends in the States, that's roughly 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that was at the beginning, or maybe the middle of October. After I showed him the thermometer, he finally caved in and gave me a shitty heater. But I was glad because I was finally able to keep warm again, although I was told to only turn it on between 6 p.m. and midnight. By this point, I realized this little was nothing more than a money-grabbing tick who'd eat his own feces if it brought him money. But something told me that there was more. I knew that there was more by the way that he told me how to do things differently, just the way that he wanted them to be done. If I washed a dish one way, it wasn't good. I had to follow his precise instructions. I couldn't dry a pair of jeans and a t-shirt I need for work on the heater in the living room because it created humidity. I couldn't just throw things away that I wanted. I had to do them in a very particular manner. Some of the stuff that he demanded, I just chalked up to OCD. Some to the fact that he was just a major fucking weirdo. I tried doing what he said. I tried reasoning with him, begging, pleading, even arguing, but nothing worked. These kind of situations just persisted. The more that he tried to put effort and passion into making his arguments for everything he did, and explaining everything like he was delivering the greatest speech in the history of mankind, the less I cared about everything he said. That's what got to him. And that's when things took a turn for the worse. I started noticing things being moved in my room. Small stuff, not easily noticeable, but I noticed them. He then became increasingly distant, to the point that we barely spoke. You could cut the tension with a knife when we were in a room together. Cindy eventually moved out. She said that she was tired of this guy's shit, and she found a better looking and cheaper place. I was happy for her, and she gave me a halogen heater to use, just like that. Really sweet of her, and that heater helped me a lot in the colder months. After Cindy came Patricia, a really nice girl from Canada. She didn't know of his behavior yet. It didn't take long for her to learn, though. Like I said, I only got to use the heater between 6 and midnight only. I did this, sometimes cheating a bit, just to warm myself up in the morning. But he would watch my door like a hawk and wait for midnight to strike before knocking and telling me to turn the heater off. Other times, he would just barge in like it was nothing, apparently content to use a lame excuse like asking if I wanted some lights for my bike because he planned on ordering some. That's when I noticed another major red flag: the webcam in the dining room. I like studying my environments, so I noticed a thing that wasn't supposed to be there, up on the wall. It looked as if it had been painted in order to blend in with the rest of the wall, but I knew it had no business being there, and it stood out like a sore thumb. It's at that point that I decided that I needed to find another place soon. So we continued our dance of not really saying much to the other. I tried diffusing the tension by being happy, optimistic, and just good-natured towards him. I tried talking about the stuff that he liked, tried making conversation, but nothing seemed to work. The final major red flag dropped tonight. I got home from work, pretty beat. I had dinner, cracked open a beer, and then moved to my bed with my laptop to chat with my girlfriend and read it around. That's when I heard sounds coming from downstairs. The guy had come home, apparently completely smashed, and started throwing things, breaking things, slamming doors, cursing, all because the heater was on. He started saying things along the lines of showing no fucking respect and "Are you hot now?" Even though everything I did was trying to go by his absurd and obsessive rules. That's when the shouting and swearing continued, and I genuinely began to be afraid of what this guy could do. I know by now he's capable of just about anything. He tried provoking me by knocking on my door and yelling, "Are you heating yourself up now?" I didn't respond though, even though I'm a good foot taller and probably twice his weight. I'm in a new country where my people are not truly viewed very kindly. So in this situation, I think I would rather be the victim than the aggressor. But I eventually did call the police. They came by and told me that they wouldn't be able to do much, but strongly advised me to move out and find someplace else to live. That seemed to quiet him down, and I think he's sleeping now, but I'm still a bit on edge because I don't know what he's capable of. Now I'm faced with a dilemma. I want to move out tomorrow if possible, but I'm afraid he won't give me my deposit back if I do. I also have to work from 2 p.m. on, and I'm afraid to leave my stuff here because he might do something to it. Break it, set it on fire. Dealer's choice. I'm expecting just about everything from this guy. I don't know exactly how to proceed. And in all honesty, I just want to be as far away from this guy as possible. Update. I spoke to him this morning. He was surprised that I called the police, and he denied being drunk. He also denied saying anything to me and accused me of making stuff up, saying, "You don't even know if you're crazy or not." But all the while, he was trembling and being erratic. He did, however, say that I'd get my deposit back when I moved out. I don't know whether or not to trust this, but I'm moving out tomorrow anyway. I haven't figured out where I'm going just yet, but I know deep down, any place is better than this.